Hey everybody, today we're talking about subtracting rational numbers. We've done adding rational numbers, now it's time for subtracting. Just remember to subtract rational numbers, we'll use the same rules that we did for integers. The biggest rule that we did, and mainly the only rule we did, was to subtract a rational number or an integer. It's the same as adding the opposite. That's also where we get the phrase keep, change. So if I have -2 minus 4, -2 I keep, I change the subtraction to addition. Instead of subtracting a 4, I will add the opposite, which is -4. Now I have -2 plus -4, which is -6. Just make sure this is minus a positive 4, so I need to add a -4. Okay, here is example number 1 right there. It says -4 1/7 minus -6/7. First, I'll change all those mixed numbers to be improper fractions instead, just because they're a little bit easier to add. So I changed -4 1/7 to -29/7. Instead of subtracting, we're adding, so I changed the subtraction sign to addition. And instead of subtracting -6/7, I will add a +6/7. I took the opposite of -6/7. Now I have -29/7 plus 6/7, so I can add the numerators. -29 plus 6. Different sign, so I take the greater absolute value, subtract the lesser absolute value to get 23. I keep the sign of the greater absolute value, which is -29, so my answer is -23/7. I can make this a mixed number and call it -3 2/7. Let's take a look at B. Same steps. Instead of subtracting, we're going to add the opposite. This one will have one more step added to it. So we start with -1/2. We'll be subtracting -5/9. So I keep the -1/2. I change subtraction to addition. I change -5/9 to +5/9. Now I have -1/2 plus 5/9. I need to first go ahead and make these common denominators so that I can add them. Least common multiple of 9 and 2 is 18. So I can make both denominators 18. 2 times 9 is 18, which means I need to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 9. Now, also what we had talked about in the last video is making sure to keep this negative with the numerator. So -1 times 9 is -9. Now, 9 times 2 is 18, so I need to multiply numerator and denominator of that fraction also by 2, which would get me 10/18. I'll add the fractions. I have -9/18 plus 10/18. -9 plus 10 gets me 1, so my final answer is 1/18. 10 has a greater absolute value than -9, so we keep the sign with 10, which means it's positive. Let's try one more. This one isn't on your page. Please write it down because it's really important that we see one that has just subtraction instead of subtracting a negative. So keep, change tells me I keep 1/2. I change, instead of subtraction, I'm going to add. Instead of the opposite, or instead of 1/4, I'll take the opposite, which is -1/4. So instead of 1/2 minus 1/4, I now have 1/2 plus -1/4. Let's first go ahead and get common denominators. In this case, it's nice because the least common multiple of 2 and 4 is just 4. This is already a number over 4, so we can keep it. Again, we're going to make that negative go with the numerator, -1/4. Now, in order to get 2 to be 4, I can multiply it by 2, which means I need to multiply numerator and denominator by 2. 2/4 plus -1/4, 2 plus -1 is 1, so my final answer is 1/4. Notice here how this one was plus a negative. It's not always plus a positive. Okay, example number 2. This one's now an application of subtraction. One thing we use subtraction for is to find the distance between 2 points. If I want to find the distance between 2 points, I can subtract them. So I'll take the biggest one and I'll subtract the smallest one to find how far away those two numbers are. So I have 2 1/3 minus negative 2 1/3. Let's first change all of our mixed numbers to be improper fractions. 2 times 3 is 6 plus 1 is 7. 2 times 3 is 6 plus 2 is 8. All right, now instead of subtracting, we're going to add. And instead of negative 2 2/3, I'm taking the opposite. The opposite in this case is positive. So now I have 7/3 plus 8/3. We already have common denominators, so we can just subtract our numerators to have 15/3. 15 divided by 3, well, I can simplify that to be 5. This will always work. The distance between 2 points, we can always take one number and subtract the other number. Notice something else, that we almost always have distance be positive. We can also look at it on the number line. So I could see if I could count how many units away on the number line those two numbers are. Okay, here's example number 3. Again, this is a distance question. A new road that connects Uniontown to Springfield is 4 1/3 miles long. What's the change in the distance? So this new dotted line road is 4 1/3 miles long. The old road, though, I used to have to go 2 3/8 and 3 5/6. So let's first find how long the old road was. If I had to do both of these, I can add them together to find the total distance. I first went ahead and changed my two fractions to have a common denominator. So 8 and 6, the least common multiple of 8 and 6 is 24. So I know that 8 times 3 is 24, so I multiply numerator and denominator by 3 to get 2 and 9 over 24. 6 times 4 is 24, so I can multiply numerator and denominator by 4. In this case, it's 20 over 24. Now I have 2 and 9 24ths plus 3 and 20 24ths. Let's first go ahead and make these improper fractions so we can add them. 24 times 2 gets me 48, plus 9 is 57. 24 times 3 plus 20 is 92. Now I have 57 over 24 plus 92 over 24, which gets me 149 over 24, which I can simplify to be 6 5/24. So to summarize this long process, I added my two numbers by first getting a common denominator, then making improper fractions, then adding. Now, this initially starts with 6 5/24, but I want to know what's the change, so what's the difference? So I'll subtract 4 1/3 from 6 5/24. I already know that 6 5/24 is 149 over 24. Let's go ahead and make 4 1/3 into an improper fraction, and then we'll get it to be common denominators. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 1 is 13. This is 13 over 3. Now I know that in order to have a denominator of 24, I need to multiply numerator and denominator by 8. That gets me 104 over 24. Now we're ready to subtract. We have 149 over 24. We're going to subtract 104 over 24. And subtraction is the same thing as adding the opposite. So we'll start with 149 over 24. We keep that. Instead of subtracting, we add. Instead of 104, we need the opposite, which is negative 1 over 4. Now we have 149 plus negative 104. So if I carry out that subtraction, I know that I get 49 over 24. On your own, I want you to finish simplifying this until you get to a mixed number in simplest form.